Um, Welcome to the January meeting. Thank you all for attending. Thank the New Jersey Antique Radio Club for sponsoring the meeting and providing our Zoom feed. We really appreciate it. And before we get started, I'll have Dave give his normal courtesy message.
Yeah, just the usual. Most important thing is please abide by Zoom etiquette and keep your microphones muted if you're not actively, intentionally speaking. I was on a Zoom meeting the other night where one of the guys, I wasn't running the meeting, so I couldn't do anything about it. One of the guys was just making a terrible racket every once in a while, at the same time that the host of the meeting, the volume was probably about 5% of what it should have been. So I had it turned up all the way. And then every time this guy started banging garbage cans around or whatever, I think I did permanent damage to my eardrums from that. So anyway, you're all much better behaved and much better looking than those guys are. So I'm sure we'll be fine.
Okay, well, I hope your eardrums have recovered. Let's go ahead, since we're already been here for a while. Let's start with anybody who is new to this meeting that would like to introduce themselves.
I'm Vern Thaler from Topeka, Kansas. Old-time TV repairman, electronic instructor at a tech school. Retired.
Thank you, Vern. Anybody else?
Paul Gibbons, grew up in Ohio, worked for WKYC TV for almost a month back in the 70s. Moved to California, and I've been an electronics buff all my life, and I think you guys are doing a fabulous job down there near at the museum near Columbus. And I've been there several times. I actually paid for a membership for a couple of years and kind of let it lapse, but anyway, looking to go back there again sometime, and so I'm glad to be able to talk to y'all, and I'm glad you guys are carrying on.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else?
My name is Mike Stein. I started my broadcast career in 1968. I worked for New Jersey Public Television and KPNX Television in Phoenix, the NBC affiliate. And I'm also a antique TV collector. So it's my first meeting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome. Anybody else?
Hey, I'm Jack Saunders. I've been collecting TVs for around 4 years now, TVs and radios. And my entire second bedroom is just my collection. So I really thank my wife for that. Yeah, I've been to a few meetings, the online meetings, and first time I'm speaking up, but I really hope to visit the museum in the near future. It's one of my things that I really look forward to.
Thanks, Jack. Welcome. Anybody else?
Paul Gabarczyk here in Chicagoland. Been in the TV business professionally since 1981. Anybody who's in Chicago would know, former employee of Rex TV for a number of years, and then ended up at Sony and then Sharp for the last 16 years. Yes, I've always enjoyed restoring sets, and glad to be part of the group, and enjoyed the museum, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else? Got a lot of new people tonight. Well, I guess that's it. May give a brief report on the museum. Somebody mentioned that they were a member for a while back. We had our membership drive starting in the 1st of December. We're up to, I think, 132 members now, including a fairly large number of sustaining members that have committed to pay $5 or more per month, which is really nice. So we urge anybody that isn't a member to become one. That's one of our major sources of income for the museum. It does get you a discount at the convention, and it supports what we're doing. The big news is that we have set the date for the convention. It is May 5th through 7th. And we'll be sending a bulk email out to everybody probably tomorrow anyway, in the next couple of days, that has the details that we have right now. Format's going to be very similar to the last one we had, but we've made a couple of changes to deal with the bottleneck we had with the auction last year. And as part of that, part of the convention, we've decided on our prize for the sweepstakes this year, and it is a RCA pre-war TRK-5, which is unbelievably rare. One was donated to the convention. It's complete, but it needed some cabinet work, so that's being done now. So it'll have a nice cabinet on it. It won't be electronically restored. It'll have a good CRT. And the sets are pretty easy to restore. They're a very simple set. And we're going to start selling the tickets at the convention because, in past years we've had the drawing at the convention, but this year we can't do that because the cabinet work won't be done until just before the convention. So we'll have it on display at the convention, and we'll start selling tickets then, and the drawing will be, I think, the 1st of August is what we've set. So make your plans now. We expect a large turnout. For those of you who have been, it's a fun experience. Any questions?
No, but thank you. I got my thank you note for the sustaining membership, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. One of our many sustaining members. Well, I guess we'll move on to the next part of the meeting. We don't have a presentation this month.
Excuse me, Steve.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention Chuck's CRTs?
The what?
The CRTs that I picked up from Chuck Azar.
Oh, I haven't heard from you about what you got.
Oh,
So
okay.
why don't you go ahead and talk about it?
Yeah, well, our former member and former board member of the Early Television Foundation passed away a short while back, and through I guess a somewhat circuitous route, Steve got a call from one of the people who was responsible for purchasing part of Chuck's estate. It was decades of recorded tapes that he had made over the years, and part of them went to a historic film and video archive, and then apparently thousands of them, many thousands of hours, went to the Internet Archive, who was at his house the day before I got there to pick up the tapes, and for whatever reason, through the film and video archive people, I guess they just poked around and found the museum. I don't think there was any formal connection, was there, Steve?
No.
So bizarrely, they called Steve and said, well, they had a couple of CRTs that were stashed away in the attic in the garage, and did we want them? So Steve said, yeah, and he contacted me and said, would you mind going to pick these up? And he sent me a picture of three picture tubes. So I went over there, didn't even bother taking the seats out of my van to go pick up 3 picture tubes. And I picked up all 35 of the 3 picture tubes while I was there. And I don't even have an inventory of what's there yet, but I can tell you that the worldwide shortage of 7 JP4s and 8 BP4s is over for a while.
Well, that's great. Dave, thanks for picking those up. As those of you who may not know this, but another major source of income for the museum is selling CRTs. We've had, gosh, I guess a couple of hundred donated over the last couple of years, and we sell them at bargain prices because we have two goals. One is to raise some money for the museum, and the other is to make the tubes available for people that want to restore sets. And this will be great to have especially the 7JP4s. They are always in demand. In fact, we're even to the point we had 3 weak ones that we recently sold. That's how desperate people are. And weak on a 7JP4 is pretty weak. Forgot to mention one other thing about the feature of the convention. Every year we have an auction. This year, we will have a CT100 with a good CRT in it. It's in nice shape cosmetically and complete in the auction. And I think we're going to have another former board member of the foundation who also passed away last year. I think we're going to have his collection at the auction. So we're likely to have some really good stuff. And generally stuff goes for good prices at the auction, way less than you pay in other places. Okay, well, let's go back to the presentation. Larry, I see he's there. And Dave, if you could switch over to, yeah, he's waving right now. Larry is our employee at the museum who runs the museum in my absence and does a wonderful job, for those of you who don't know him. And when I'm out of town, he handles the video of what we show in the museum for the month's meeting. Okay, what we're going to focus on tonight is projection sets, and I'm going to take you through the entire gamut of what we've got. We have a lot of projection sets, and this is going to include several different types. I'm going to start with the earliest, and that's the Empire State, which is a mechanical set, a 45-line mechanical set. There are only a couple of them in existence, and this one we restored. It has some non-original parts in it, but it works, and it uses a crater lamp, which produces a very bright spot, projecting through lenses that are mounted in a 45 in a disc with 45 holes where these lenses are installed, and it creates and it projects through those lenses onto this ground glass screen. There's the converter that Daryl Hawk built that converts NTSC to the 45-line standard. And there's a picture of the crater lamp. Now, we're not using the original crater lamp. We did for a while because they are very, very rare. That one is good, and we want to keep it that way. So we're using an LED with a lens arrangement in place of the crater lamp. So let's move on to the earliest post-war projection sets, and this set is really, we call it pre-war because it was made in 1945. It's the first one that we know of. This is made by Bell and Howell. It was a prototype. They never manufactured a set. It was made in 1944, actually. We determined this just after RCA introduced their projection system that is the guts of many of the projection sets from this one on. It uses a 5TP4 CRT, about 25 kilovolts on the anode, and it uses a parabolic mirror. The tube is face downward, and the image bounces off of a parabolic mirror beneath the tube, and then up through a correction lens, and then up to a mirror into the screen. Now of the projection sets from the early post-war area, this is the brightest technology they had. There are a couple others I'll talk about in a minute. This produced the brightest picture, and not very bright. You needed to watch it in a darkened room, really. We restored this set too, though we haven't turned it on in quite a while. It has a continuous tuner. It was from the Chicago area where Bell and Howell was headquartered. Okay, let's move on to the other post-war projection sets that we have, starting with the early ones. We'll just go through these. I've given Larry a list because a lot of these are similar. There are two basic kinds of projection sets from the late 40s, starting in 46 and going through 49, when they people stopped making them. A large number of them use the RCA projection system that I mentioned, but there are several others. This is the Philco 48-2500, and this is one of the sets that uses a different tube. It's the only one that I know of that uses it. It's a TP400, which is a 3-inch tube. It looks very much like the 3NP4, but it was Philco. Philco is the only company that used that tube. Now let's go to a couple of the others here. Here's the Scott, which is a beautiful set. It again uses the RCA system. Now, I was mentioning there are two kinds of projection sets from this era. One is ones that were designed for home use, and the Scott and the RCA. Where is that? The RCA Berkshire are examples of that. This monstrosity.
Now, when you say RCA system, are you talking about the 400 line system or?
No, these are all 525 line.
Oh, okay.
By RCA, I mean the RCA projection system that they sold to a bunch of manufacturers with the 5TP4 projection tube and the parabolic mirror. And this is just a very, very elaborate set. It weighs a ton. I know when it was donated to the museum, getting it in there was quite a challenge. Well, let's move on to the other type of projection sets, and here's an example of it. This is the Tradiovision. Again, it uses the same projection system. This is a sort of a crude set. It's got a huge screen, and the screen is plastic. Again, an incredibly dim picture. This thing, and it has a separate RF unit with a channel selector. Here's a picture of the back, and you can see can you see this, when it says back with covers, you can see the projection assembly right in that picture. It's like a big tub and that's the neck of the CRT sticking up. That was located in a bar in Flint, Michigan when we got it. This is an interesting one. This is the Snyder Auditorium, and this was designed for use in a bar. This was a kit set. we have the documentation for assembling it. This simply has again, a 5TP4 down at the bottom, and then just a big lens. Not nearly as efficient as the parabolic reflector, and so therefore much dimmer. This was for, again, sold for bars and so forth. And here are a couple of sets that were designed for a bar installation or a club. And then really before RCA sort of dominated that market, the main manufacturer of sets was a company called US Television. And in 1947, they introduced several models. Here's one. Here's another one, which this probably to me is the ugliest set we've got in the museum. That Naugahyde. And then here's another crude one, Telecon. Here's a nice picture of the projection assembly, the parabolic reflectors at the bottom. Now, the next category, I really would like to, I can't show you this, and I don't have it on the website for some reason. I've never, for some reason, we never put it on. I have to add it. But we have a gadget with it has a platform on it and a giant lens. And you put a 13-inch set. This is from the 60s, I think. You put a TV set on that platform, and the lens would project it onto a screen. And so it turned a regular TV set into a projection set. Now, the other category of sets are ones that were designed for theater use. And we have several of them. Here's one. This has I think a 5AZP4, a later version of the 5-inch tube that used a higher anode voltage and just a lens.
Steve, that used a 3NP4.
That used a 3NP4.
Yeah, it wasn't an exact 3NP4. It was a high output one.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what it says. Yeah. Okay, great. Here's another one. Giant view. Big monstrous thing.
I have a question, Steve. Are these photos sets that you actually have in the museum?
Yes, everything is stuff we have in the museum.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Thank you.
And then the final one I want to show you is this one. This one's restored and working. We've got it set up so you can push a button and watch it, but it uses a 40 kilovolt power supply. Here it is. And there's you can see the neck of the projection tube. This was used made in 1954, and it was used for what they were trying to do with it is using it in theaters for business meetings, and they use it also in conference rooms and things like that. They'd wheel it in, and if a company wanted to make a presentation remotely to several locations, they would put these things in. Oh, I do want to show you one more, because it's sort of interesting. This is a British projection set. What was unique about about this is that one of the problems with a projection set is that you've got, when you set it up, you have two focuses to deal with. One is the electronic focus on the CRT itself, and the other is the mechanical focus. And so Philips made this neat little gadget. These sets used 3NP4 that was the shape of a 3NP4, and had batteries in it and a test pattern on the screen. Just a photograph, a slide. And what you do is you'd install that in place of the 3MP4 and adjust the optical focus. And then you'd put the 3MP4 back, and then you could adjust the electrical focus, which solved that problem.
Yeah, RCA had one of those also, Steve.
Did they?
Yeah, I never found one. I looked for years because of all the projection sets I had. And they're such a nightmare to get through, but
Yeah, right.
never could find one. I couldn't even find a dud anywhere for years.
Yeah. I don't know where we got ours, but I didn't know what it was at first. And finally I found out.
I noticed
should
in the pictures of the RCA set, I've got a 48 that the regulation, the high voltage regulation, I guess, was so bad that there was this umbilical cord to a separate little box that you had a brightness and a contrast control,
Right.
because you had to kind of manipulate that on the fly. If the picture changed, you'd have to make those adjustments because of the poor regulation. At least I think it was a regulation issue.
Okay, here's that remote control.
Yep, that's the one.
That comes with the Berkshire. Well, that I never realized that was the purpose of it. I wondered why they would make a remote control that would only brightness and contrast.
Yeah, because if you went from imagine trying to watch, I don't know, well, they probably didn't televise golf, but even just a movie that went from a scene with a lot of contrast to a scene with not much contrast, and
right.
the electronics couldn't handle that, so you actually had to be your own brightness and contrast adjuster on the fly while you were watching the program.
Right. Well, that's our collection of projection sets from 1931 through about 1954.
You didn't show them the one that you can live in, Steve.
The which one?
The Dalto. The color.
Delta.
The color.
What's that?
The color projection.
I didn't. Let me pull that up.
Somebody could live inside of that thing.
Not for long.
No, not you can't for long, right?
There we go.
Yeah.
Here's the Dalto. And you can see this is when when it was delivered. Chuck donated it. So that's what it looks like.
I had to donate it. I had no place to put it.
But tell us about this, Chuck. This is you know more about it than I do.
It was built in the mid 60s. They made 19 of them for the government. Most of them ended up in places like the atomic labs, and they used them as a back projection unit. This one came out of Arizona.
Here it is working, sort of.
I never got it working perfectly because the guy that I bought it from did the cardinal sin of taking the projection units apart. And the first thing in the manual says, do not disassemble the mechanics. So, of course, without the correct fixtures, it was trial and error for months. And I was able to, as you can see on the screen there, I was able to get a screen of about, I think that was like 3 or 4 foot square. The thing could project up to 24 feet across.
Wow.
That was the biggest thing I could make and stay in convergence.
Wow.
It ran on about 40 some odd thousand volts on the 3 tubes. Each tube was its own color, phosphor, and it is lead lined. As you can see, we were worried about that at the time. All the covers were off.
Wow.
And
you imagine what you can get now.
What's that?
For $100, you can now get a color projector that completely beats this.
Yeah, this thing cost. What the hell was it? I think the government paid close to $80,000 or $90,000 for these.
Wow.
Have any of you ever experienced the Schlieren optical units that they came up with later?
The oil films.
Yeah, the oil films.
I almost bought one, but I got smart.
Yeah.
We have
I talked to a guy that worked for a company that schlepped these around and set them up for special events, and he said, "Oh my God, talk about a house of cards! Any one thing would go wrong, and the whole thing would die, and he'd have to start all over again."
Well, I use the GE Teleria projectors, which were kind of like the baby Itaphores. I used those for a number of years, and used to have. There was a company that specialized in running them, and they rented them out. Came out with an operator, and the first time that I used one, we were doing playback from U-matic, and nobody told me that it was absolutely mandatory to have a time-based corrector on the output of a U-matic machine if you were going to use one of these things. And the guy was just horrified because he said, if there is any tiny little hit, any little discontinuity in your control track there, he said, the projector is going to go to hell and it'll be minutes before your picture comes back. So we got lucky. It was just another one of thousands and thousands of bullets that I dodged over the years.
We have a GE Teleria at the Broadcast Museum in Texas, and it works pretty well, amazingly enough, and even came with three lenses, and it does take an hour to warm up before it takes a picture, though, which is really disconcerting. I watched one of these things. I used to do sound for all kinds of events, and they were fairly common back in the 80s for corporate affairs, especially at a Dr. Pepper convention. Luckily, it was on the day of rehearsals. I watched one of them fall off of the about 10 feet of scaffolding, face down with a lens crammed back up inside the projector. They had to get another one. If you tilt the thing over about 15 degrees, it will screw up, and the oil will go down into the CRT's electron gun and blow up the tube. So they're very delicate. They do have you have to handle them with care. But like I say, we have one that actually works. Amazing.
Absolutely, I'd like to see that.
Cool. Well, maybe sometime we'll do a Teleria demonstration on this thing.
Yeah,
that would be nice. Yeah.
Well, that could be possible. I might want to record it, however, because they are a little iffy. But we've also got a couple of barcodes that are really fun that use a light valve projector, basically a DLP. And they're really exciting. There's one of them that does 14,000 lumens, which is pretty darn bright. But it's about like having your electric dryer running in the room with the door open. The heat comes pouring off of this sucker like it's going out of style. It does make a good picture, though.
You need an Itaphore or two there, Chuck.
Yeah,
Right.
They used to be on the concerts I did. I mean, I remember doing concerts in a lot of places that had Itaphores set up in the place. And I know I did some conventions where they brought in, there was a company called TNT, I think, that rented Itaphores out. And first of all, you need a forklift to move one. And as I recall, you needed to run 3-phase 240 volt or 208 volt to the thing using 4-aught welding cable for power. The power connector, which was a little on the exciting side. I have no idea if the people who ran those are still with us, or if they died from X-ray, overdoses or whatever. But they made a great picture back in about 1978 or so. That was hot stuff.
Yeah, and my buddy Ted, who told me that you'd get two of them and you'd overlay them on top of each other to get the picture twice as bright.
Really?
No, they do that. They literally would. They build a giant pile of scaffolding with one on top of another. Now, one of the barcodes we've got has feet on it that's intended so you can stack them, and you can stack as many as you want, I guess, if you've got time to converge the thing. They used to do it, though, quite a bit, and it did make a really bright picture that way.
When I worked at Zenith, we supplied Zenith CRT projectors to one of the TV stations in Chicago to project their large image behind the news presenter. And in that case, the cameras they had were insensitive to the red phosphor. So essentially, the second projector was just doubling the red output to get a good color balance. But they had stacks of other direct view monitors in the set, and they put orange filters over the faces of all of those to get the color balance.
I remember seeing that being done on some news sets where they had a bunch of monitors behind them. And when you went and actually looked at the set in person, there was a piece of gel material that looked like it belonged on a light fixture somewhere, scotch taped over the CRT on the things. Apparently that they looked okay on the air.
Yeah, the reason for that is that Plumicon cameras had very sharp deep red and infrared cutoffs and couldn't see the red phosphor. And then when they brought in solid state cameras, the manufacturers put in deliberate infrared cut filters so that you could mix solid state and Plumicon cameras and get the same rendition. But they were all really deficient on the deep red.
Steve, Dave A. here. Does John Folsom still have his RCA 3-tube projection set?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he does.
Don't know whether it's working or not, but I helped get him some tubes I found at a flea market years ago. But I haven't heard any more since.
Dave, you talking about that little Japanese piece?
No, the big floor standing 3-tube. They use, the Norelco system for all 3 tubes, and all 3 tubes were properly colored for red, blue, green, or whatever.
Well, I haven't seen. I talked to John about a week or so ago, and he hasn't sold anything. So whatever he had years ago is still in that house.
There's also another category of the freestanding projection unit, usually a Norelco Patelgram that you would modify up your your RCA TV and jump her into this thing, your 641 or whatever, into this thing. They were little roll around stands that would connect to your RCA set or whatever.
Hey, Dave, Bob Anderson is restoring one of those right now. As a matter of fact, he's showing his progress on YouTube. So that'll be interesting.
Perfect. I'm not crazy.
When you get into the 70s and 80s, all of a sudden projection TV really took off. Henry Close of Close Nova Beam and originally Advent. I had an Advent video projector about 1976 or so. I went into a great deal of debt to have the thing, but my wife was in law school and I had nothing to do while she was studying. So I bought this silly TV, had an Electro Home chassis in the thing. And it was kind of interesting the way they did it. And then I later became a Nova Beam dealer. And those are a real trip by themselves. But they sold a lot of them, and we put a whole ton of them in nightclubs and bars and discos and things like that, and in people's houses too. So they were expensive, but they made an okay picture, not a great picture, but an okay picture. At the Broadcast Museum, we've got one made by made in Athens, Texas, and it seems to have Nova Beam parts in it, although the chassis says NEC. I'm trying to think who that is. They call it expensive and darn well worth it. And then we've also got a Pioneer that says 1983 on it. That makes an amazing picture. It still works great. Might have been worth the money. Who knows?
Hey, Chuck, wasn't there at least one set back in that Advent era that had 2 CRTs. Do you remember that?
Yes, Sony made a 2 CRT one. I never liked the picture on them, but they were trying to do it, I guess, for just for cost reasons. And there might have been some other versions of it too, but I know Sony had one. And then there were the people that took a Sony Trinitron TV and put this lens in front of it. Steve was talking about something similar, but from an earlier era. They'd had this plastic cone that was molded to fit over one of the 13-inch Sony CRTs, and you bought this in a high gain screen, and now you had a projection TV. If you had no lights in the room, it kind of worked.
Yeah, you could watch it at midnight. Yeah.
Inside of a black cat at midnight, it worked pretty good, but otherwise, you just wasted your money.
There was also the Indextron that had a projection possibility. Some straight projection, some had a beta machine attached to it.
Well, there's some weird things that came out there. I think there were a lot of little manufacturers that were kind of local that made some odd projection TVs. Until we got flat panel TVs, everybody wanted a big picture, and they wanted something that didn't take up all the space. Some of these are just ridiculous because they unfold with a set of mirrors that stick out about halfway into your living room. The 3 CRTs bounce off of that and then off of the screen. I know Sony sold a whole ton of 3 CRT sets that were used mostly in industrial purposes, classrooms, things like that. We got one of those too. It does work, not real well, but it works.
Hey,
Well,
Steve.
we can talk about anything we want. It doesn't have to be about projection sets. So if you got something else to talk about, bring it up.
I was going to ask you, Steve, is there a specific model television that the museum doesn't have that you've been looking for?
Yeah, love to have a Farnsworth War set. But we have everything except the just super rare stuff. There are a couple we'd like to have an Admiral color set, 15-inch color set.
Octagon.
Yeah. We have a replica Octagon, but would like to have a real one. So I guess those are the main sets we'd like to get.
Steve, there's on the RCA pre-war set page, there's a 1939 projector, and I wonder if you can call that up and share it. But at least I'll mention it. The design looks like the grandfather of the Daleks on Doctor Who, because it's kind of tall and rectangular, and the projection lens is at the top center. But one of those was still in use at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago in the 1950s, before they changed the TV exhibit to the color TV exhibit. And it was in a room where the doorway had a maze of black cloth that you had to walk through to get in, and then you had to stand and let your eyes adjust for a few minutes before you could see the picture. It was so dim.
I never.
A lot of that museum, there was a lot of stuff that happened up there. The most the most interesting thing I think is that I know of is they were several years ago when Danny Gustafson passed away. His partner in his advertising business was disposing of his collection, and one of the things in the collection was a CRT receiver built by Purdue University in 1931, I think. It was for use with, it was a 60 line system. It was for use with a mechanical camera, and we ended up buying a bunch of the sets that in Danny's collection, and including that one. And I guess Purdue University heard about this, and I started getting threatening almost phone calls from them, telling me that set had been donated to the museum in Chicago, and somehow ended up in Danny's collection. And I know of several other sets that had a similar story. So there was some kind of funny business going on. We didn't end up buying the set. We ended up Danny's partner ended up selling it to Purdue.
That's probably, Steve, that's probably not a surprise. This is Dave Arlen from Indiana. Zworykin had a relationship with Purdue, and some of Zworykin's materials are there on display. So somebody knew what they had. Yeah. One of my favorite memories was when Danny was still alive, was going to visit his apartment in Chicago, where he kept his good stuff. Maybe you went there, and that was much like Arnold Chase in Connecticut. That was just like, this is crazy. This belongs in a museum. So thankfully, much of that has lived on to come to the early TV museum.
Yeah. A lot of our stuff came from Danny's collection.
I have a TV set question that hopefully someone in this group could help me out with. Has anyone ever heard of a video detector crystal called a Sylvania 1N34?
Well, that's a very common diode.
Yeah, I've never encountered one. I'm working on a Magnavox television set that's from about 1948, and usually it's probably cheating. So I apologize if I offend anyone, but rather than messing around with alignments of RF and IF sections and things like that, when I fix up a TV for the first time, I generally try to just give direct audio and video inputs and just use the sync and sweep circuits and be able to get a good picture and good sound on a TV without having to mess with the whole front end. Then I don't have to use a modulator. I could actually just hook up a DVD player.
Sure.
And this one Magnavox chassis that I'm working on now is the first one I've encountered with this 1N34. Usually the video detector is a vacuum tube and not this, they call it a crystal in the schematic, but that's followed up by a two-stage 6SN7 video amplifier. And so when I feed that 6SN7 capacitively coupled from a DVD player, the picture is not overloaded. It's a very good picture, but I'm getting 2.5 like retrace lines that I don't seem to be able to get rid of. And I don't know whether that's due to something about the set that maybe I'm feeding in the wrong level coming right out of a DVD player. I don't know. Just thought if anybody'd ever run into that before, they could give me a hint.
Well, I'll mention the 1M34 you ought to be able to find. That was an fairly early, I think it's a germanium diode.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you can't find, just do a search on on
Yeah.
Google.
Well, I go in, I don't use that. I go into, I feed
Yeah, I
the
understand.
lamp after
Right.
that. So
Right.
I just wonder, I don't know what the level is of that diode detector as opposed to other sets that I've worked at that have a vacuum tube as a detector. Maybe that I've got some level or impedance matching issue or something. Or maybe it's not related to that at all. Maybe it's further downstream in the sync circuits that something's not being blanked, where I get a couple of retrace lines.
Does that set
the
up DC
level-
restoration?
It does have, it uses half of a 6AL5 for DC restoration.
The detector output level varies with receiver design, depending on how much gain follows it. So just saying it's a tube detector or a crystal detector is not going to tell you what the level should be. But a typical level is more than the 1 volt peak to peak that comes out of a DVD player. It's often 3 or 4 volts in some chassis.
Or 6 volts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, for any of you real engineers out there, anytime I've seen visible retrace lines, it's always due to the brightness being up too high. Wayne, anybody else who actually knows what they're talking about? Would that situation?
I can minimize the effect by playing with brightness and contrast. Usually I try to crank and get a little bit more, I guess, than I should out of the brightness, and that is when they show up and become more pronounced. But
how old is this set?
It's older than I am.
Well, is it 1950s, 1940s?
No, it's a 1948.
Okay. And I have to say that I really don't know, because some of the early sets did not have power retrace blanking.
Right.
But that may be the case. In that set you have, typically a blanking pulse would be coupled to the CRT grid, and the video is coupled to the cathode. So a negative pulse is applied to the grid through a capacitive circuit. But some of the early sets did not have power blanking, and they depended on you not turning up the brightness, which is really a black level. You should set the brightness control so that blacks are black and not gray or foggy.
Yep. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's probably just an adjustment thing. Like I say, I can minimize the effect with the brightness and contrast controls. It's just if I try to make it too bright, I guess, or too sharp, then I can see them. There's only about 2.5 of them, and they're very thin. It's just probably most people wouldn't notice them, like just people coming over to visit and saying, "Oh, look, it's a really cool TV." But because I look at too many old TVs all the time, I can see it where it doesn't show up on my other set.
You may be trying to compensate for your signal not being big enough by turning up the brightness, when what you really need is to turn up the contrast.
Okay.
So I would say if you're going in with 1 volt of video, look on Video Karma or some other place to find a symbol schematic for a transistor amplifier with a gain of 4 or 5 times, and see if that helps.
I did post a question on Video Karma earlier today. I just haven't gotten anybody's response yet. So,
if your set does not have blanking, and a number of them didn't in the really early sets, and there are a bunch of circuits that people have come up with for adding it.
Yep.
do a search for that. Also, we have 2 or 3 of them on our website. You could search and probably find. The first thing to determine is whether it does have blanking. If it doesn't, then
I don't believe it. I don't believe it does. It does have DC restoration, but it doesn't have blanking.
Yeah, I would think that would.
Yeah,
I think that would solve your problem.
I have a TV question for the group, if I may. This is a Hollis Baird set photo I took a few years ago. It's missing the front lens that fits over that little 1-inch screen, but I'm looking to find out if anyone knows the model number and what year this was made. I was told that this particular set was owned by Dr. Lee DeForest.
Wow.
Does the museum have one of these by any chance?
Yeah, we have one, and I think ours is missing the lens too. I can't remember. I would say I think 1931, but let me see if I can find it.
It's got to be one of the first TVs.
It's a little bit later than the first ones because the first sets were the Nipkow discs. Let me see.
Steve, it is missing the lens.
Is it missing the lens? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But let me look it up.
Looks like you might be able to get away with a crystal from a good-sized wristwatch from back in the day.
Right. Yeah, ours is missing the lens too.
There's another old TV set. Does anybody recognize that?
And it was, I think it was made in, my guess would be 1931.
It's funny, someone just looking at that who had no idea what they were looking at might confuse that to be some sort of power sander.
Yeah, right.
Anybody recognize that?
Other than it's a Nipkow disc.
Right.
Looks like it got multiple spirals.
Thank you.
3D.
Hey, John,
IBM,
you were asking
IBM
about
370.
I was just going to say, John, you were asking about how people felt about running in a baseband video signal as opposed to RF in the sets, and if anybody spends any time on the Facebook groups, there's a lot of opinions there, and everybody's always polite on Facebook and on the internet, of course.
Right.
but I think there is sort of a consensus. There's an awful lot of things in the TV collecting and restoration community that'll get you tarred and feathered, but that's not one of them. I think there's pretty much a consensus that that's a reversible modification that actually makes a lot of sense sometimes. So I wouldn't be looking over my shoulder if I was you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, back in the day when everybody used, or not everybody, but when I used VCRs and they had a built-in modulator, then I would just go in on channel 3 or channel 4, just like you're quote unquote supposed to. But then when we moved over to DVDs and the modulators disappeared out of the DVD players, well, then it was time to find a workaround for that rather than adding a modulator just so I could demodulate. It's like, well, I've got the baseband and I know there's a place for the baseband to go in the TV if I just go into the circuit and find it, provided, of course, that you've got a set with a transformer in it, not like some of the Philco Predictas that are transformerless, and then you'd actually have to use an isolation transformer to do that. But
there are some sets. I mean, I've got 2, as a matter of fact, that a couple of very intelligent people and myself have looked at these things, and we just cannot get the tuners working. So there's that.
Yep. Yep.
We sort of cheat. We go halfway. When we restore a set, the only thing we do is make it work on channel 3.
Right.
Because that's what our distribution system is, which makes it a lot easier.
Yep.
Well, Steve, we had the bright idea. I guess I had the bright idea in our museum here in New Jersey. I said, because we have a coax system feeding the signals to the TVs. And I said, well, we can feed more than one signal out through the coax, and then we can give the visitors the experience of actually changing the channels. And of course, everybody jumped on me and said, yeah, that's just what we need, is people turning all more of the knobs and breaking everything. I said, yeah, I'm an idiot. That's right. We don't want to do that. That would be a really bad idea.
Give them access to the AGC control, give them everything, right?
Stick your hands in the back of the projection set. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Better yet, let your kid stick his hands back there. Yeah.
Hey, Steve, how are you feeding all of the televisions at the museum? Are you using a transmitter, or are you doing sort of a coax through the walls?
We have coax to each area has, we have several coax systems. The British sets, because they're 405 lines, we have a distribution system for them with a standards converter that puts it out on the channel 1 of the British system. For the NTSC, for the black and white sets, we have another. For the pre-war sets, we have a distribution system. We have another one for the post-war, and we have another one for the color sets. And they're all just they're not DVD. We used to use DVDs, but now we've got a little gadget called a Mica. You can buy for I think they're like $40, and they're just solid state. They'll play back a video, and they're much more reliable.
Interesting. Thank you.
Hey, Steve, are all of our pre-war sets running 441?
They all run 5.
Oh, okay. I would have done that.
Bother because they work fine on 525.
Yeah.
At the museum, we don't get the sound. We have the sound disabled in all our sets. Otherwise, kids coming through the museum will turn them up and listen to sit down on the floor and watch the show.
When was the last time 441 was used for anything?
I think probably not, the 1940s, something like that. I can't remember when they went to 525, but it was in that, or the early 40s.
525 standard was set in 1941.
41.
Hey, Steve, it's Chuck. Got a off topic. Did you ever get a hold of that woman in Arizona?
No, I never got an email from you.
Well, I've sent you 2 emails so far with her, because she keeps sending emails to me about them. So,
what email address are you sending it to?
Yours, Gmail. Let me see. Hang on a minute. Steve. I have you at stevemcvoy@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's right. I wonder if they've gone into my spam folder.
You ought to take a look before she ends up junking all that stuff.
I will.
She's actually.
I'll take a look after we get off, and if
the last email she got, she's willing to actually bring the stuff to you. So.
Yeah, let me check and see if
I don't have any room for this stuff anymore. So.
If not, I will. I'll get in touch with you, and we'll try the museum email address.
All right. Just want to make sure before it gets lost.
Right.
do my good deed for the decade.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Say, I believe the gentleman asked about the Baird scanning drum set that's, I believe, a 26 or 36 televisor without the lens. And I noticed that you do have a 437 receiver pictures that, essentially had the same mechanics. A couple photos on the museum webpage where you can barely see the lens in it, just to get an idea what it looks like.
Right, right.
And I'm certainly puzzling over what the other mechanical set is.
Yeah. If whoever has that, if you could send me an email with a picture of it, and I can see, I'll take a look and see if I can find anything out about it.
Hey, Steve, I had a question, if I may. This is Paul Cooper Smith.
Yeah.
Just by accident, I found a museum in Dover, Ohio. It's called the Alman TV Museum. Are you aware of that? Is that a private collection?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're still around. I visited them years and years ago. It's a fairly small collection, but they have some interesting stuff. I don't know if they're still around or not.
Okay, thanks.
Well, are we running out of steam?
I'm just admiring the collection that E. Grogan has behind him there. That's quite an array of hardware you've got there. E. Grogan.
Thank you.
What is all that
stuff
stuff?
actually works?
Quick list is SVHS decks, then a whole bunch of D9 decks, and then the stuff to run my nonlinear editors. I have a Play system and three Apple-based systems.
All right.
There's also, if you saw the whole wall, it's now 200 terabytes storage online.
Wow. Yeah.
A couple Tamberg reel-to-reel recorders.
Yep.
And I still use it because I'm making money with it.
Well, that's nice if you can make your hobby pay for itself. Yeah,
So it has done very well paying for it.
Glad to hear it. Yeah,
and it's still a hobby. Now, do you know what a hobby is?
Hobby is something you enjoy doing.
No, a hobby is when a certain director or someone else calls you up and you say, I hate working with you. I'm going to spend my time doing the sock drawer instead because I don't need the money. So I do the ones that are fun.
Right. Yeah. It's always nice to be able to turn down work that from disagreeable people that you don't want to deal with.
Yeah, the way I describe that is people say, I got this project for you, blah, 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 blah. And I say, I'm busy that day. And they say, well, we didn't tell you what day it was yet. And I said, that's all right.
Try me.
So do you do this every last Saturday of the month at 8:00 Eastern Standard Time?
It's not always the last Saturday. It's one of the last Saturdays of the month.
Okay.
Fourth, usually. It varies often depending on the availability of our presenter when we have an outside presenter, and then it also depends on how organized Steve and I are.
Right.
So I could find you on Facebook then if I look around. So I know the next time.
We post the meeting. If you will go on our website and sign up for our email list, we send out email blasts about when the meetings are and what the topics are. We also post them on a bunch of the Facebook forums that deal with television.
Well, I just ran across this time, and so I thought it would be interesting, and it's very interesting.
We have a lot of our previous meetings are on our YouTube channel. If you want to go back and check,
Yeah,
there's been some pretty good ones there. Yeah,
I saw that. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm going to sign off. I haven't eaten yet. It's 2 hours earlier here, but I'm still getting pretty hungry. So thank you all for participating. I guess you keep talking as long as you want. And we hope to see you next month.
Well, thanks for putting this together.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Before you go, this is Jim Hawes in Chicago.
Right.
My friend Bob Mitchell keeps asking me what I might know about you possibly picking up that Lucitron panel that's in his house. If you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's the problem is I don't have anybody that can do it right now. I do want to I would like to have it for the museum, but the only person we really have that transports things for us is Bob Dobush, and he's pretty booked up with stuff right now. But would certainly like, if you got any ideas on how we could get it down here, I'd sure like to have it.
Not right now, but I'll keep thinking and I'll keep talking with Bob about this because this thing is fascinating.
Right.
Really.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I appreciate
Steve,
it.
Well, thank you all. Yeah.
Steve, mentioning Bob there, I wouldn't ask him to make a special trip, but did you have any idea if he was heading out to the East Coast anytime?
I don't. I'm going to be talking to him soon, and I'll ask him now that he knows the quantity. That makes it easier.
Yeah, I'm drowning in CRTs. I'm thinking of using them as lawn ornaments. They might.
Right.
But, again, I wouldn't. Only if he's coming out this way. We'll suck it up. But if he is, I'd love to see him. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Right. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steve. Dave Sika.
Hello. Hey.
See ya. Yeah. This is James again in Chicago.
Yeah.
I wrote you a while ago about the scanner that you acquired from Richard Brewster for the museum with some ideas. I was wondering if any of those were useful to you.
I am drawing a blank. I don't know if I didn't see your email or if I saw it and I forgot, but I'm not sure what we're talking about right now. So can you remind me?
You had a camera, the equivalent of a camera. It was a flying spot.
Oh, yes. Okay, now I remember. Yes. Yeah. So what are you asking?
Yeah, I wrote you a letter with some ideas about maybe how to use it, how it's restoration, and I don't know exactly what you knew about it, but I remember that
yes.
Dave Johnson, the late Dave Johnson, had seen that scanner, and I told you this the little anecdote about. Richard tried to show it to him, and that was when he was making it work, trying to make it work with LEDs. And Dave said he didn't see anything that was useful.
Yep, that's my CRS kicking in here. Yes, I absolutely remember that conversation now. We picked it up, and it's in the Raiders of the Ark back 40 of the museum right now. It looks like it's going to be a long and tall and wide project to get that working. We're going to have to really put our shoulder to the wheel there. There's a lot of issues with it, and it's incomplete, and there's a lot going on there. So I actually haven't seen it myself yet, but the people who went and picked it up and stashed it away said, yeah, it's going to be a big job if ever.
Oh my goodness! Well, that's such a rare piece, though. It's so important to at least try.
Oh, absolutely. We got a lot of interesting rare pieces that are well worth restoring, and we have very limited manpower, so we're working on that. But yeah, and certainly we'll reach out to you. If any situations come up that we're trying to puzzle something out. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just absolutely fascinated with that technology, as you know.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're the guy. So you'll be one of the first to know.
I appreciate it. I really do want to hear more about it.
Yeah, thanks for
asking. When I get it going, I'd love to see the presentation on it too.
Well, we'll all look forward to that. I would say don't hold your breath, at least not right now, but hopefully. Yeah. Knock on wood.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
This is Terry Wright out of Stillwater. I was wondering, I have a 630 TS I hope to get, and I've got it running. Is there anything anybody's really hoping for that they're looking for? What would it be?
What is that you're working on?
Oh, I just finished a 630 TS. I was hoping to get one for several years.
Oh,
and
okay, yeah.
I'm Terry Wright. I'm out of Stillwater, and I'm a retired engineer. Mm-hmm. And what is it that people are really hoping to get that they really can't find, or is really rare, or is there anything out there that, hey, it'd be nice to find that? Some of this stuff is really hard to find. The stuff, the RCAs in the 30s, they're expensive.
Well, pre-war sets are always the unicorns. I've been lucky enough to find a couple of them, but I keep hoping to find more. But that's again, you don't want to hold your breath on that. In terms of more realistic expectations, predictors have become very, very collectible, and restorable ones out in the wild are becoming pretty scarce and pricey. Dave Arlen, you're on. I know you're a big predictor fan. Would you agree? Or maybe Dave's not on.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
The other item is, does anybody have a schematic of the converters? You're going from 525, or I guess it's 625 to 405. It'd be fascinating to see how that works. Is there any kind of drawings I can find anywhere?
Well, one of our guys, Daryl Hawk, was building and selling those. I don't think they're available anymore. But they're just a custom chip in there that reads it in the memory and clocks it out.
Oh, yeah. Basic.
Well, I guess it's basic if you're a genius engineer like he is, but or maybe yourself.
He's probably in a matrix. Yeah,
I'm a shade tree engineer, so I couldn't do that if I had a gun to my head. So, yeah.
All right, I'll have to look around then. Thanks.
On converters, you might also be thinking of some of the early EBU converters that were analog. And
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, those things, you're right. Those things, finding one of those would be wonderful. I think of it in terms of my interest in the Apollo moon landing color cameras and the converters that they did for those that were electromechanical, you might know about. But they also... the first people to see the moon landing shots were in Australia, not in the U.S., because they got the feed from the downlink stations that they were using. And they had to convert that stuff again after they corrected for Doppler and after they corrected for the fact that they weren't sending NTSC to the Earth, they were sending field sequential. And they converted all that stuff with electromechanics. And then they had to convert that again for 625 lines for Australia, and then send it to the US and then to Europe and do it in probably 405, 625 and CCAM and everything else. They must have used the old EBU system, which was, again, I think monitors with a certain amount of lag that would allow them to pick up something that was usable.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with 405, they had spot wobble that they were using too.
Yeah. It'd be great to find any kind of documentation. Too much to hope for a schematic, but I bet all that stuff's gone.
Well, it would be, and you'd have to go to Europe to find out. Somebody like Roger Dupy in France that runs the Mechanical Television Museum there might know something about that.
Oh, okay. All right. That's helpful. Thanks.
He was in our, there was another club before the ETF was called ETS that Peter Yancey ran. And I was a member of that. And there's some of the people in that were foreign, and Roger was in that. And then a lot of the British people in Narrowband Television Association, which is still going, might know about that too.
I didn't know about that. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll have to do some digging. Yeah.
That's a long time. They have a website, NBTVA.
NBTVA. All right. Yeah. That's
they
very helpful.
They have several websites, and they're more into the mechanical stuff, but there are people that are interested in the high end of that. And they might, of course, they've been living with these systems that converted things for years before PAL Color took over in about 1964. Or actually, they got going in 66, just like Color here, about the same time, 66, 67.
Yeah.
And so that's all fascinating to me. A lot of that was just to dodge our patents.
It reminds me of the sound detector, the FM sound detector. There was all kinds of ways to get around the original Colonel one. There's a whole story about a colonel, I think it is, who patented it, and then everybody's trying to redesign it to get around the FM detector. But anyway, this stuff goes on all the time. So.
It's a perfectly good way. And then, of course, in Europe, they had the extra added built-in feature that different countries don't have to honor each other's patents, which is why they were able to use the super emitron in England and in Germany, but they couldn't use it over here because of the Farnsworth patents.
That Farnsworth, that's what I was trying to remember. Yeah.
And Image Orthicon came in here and was the best system of all. But they had to combine Farnsworth's multiplier with Zworykin's storage, which he borrowed from Tihany, and it was in Hungary. So I mean, the RCA people, of course, were worldwide, so they could pick the best of the best and put it together.
Yeah.
But the patents, I've been doing lots of research for years, for almost 50 years now, on mechanical television, and most of the stories you hear about mechanical television in Baird are false.
Really?
Things based on patents aren't a reliable source of who was first.
That's true. Yeah,
because they didn't honor each other's patents. They didn't honor United States patents, and the people that ran Television Magazine, which people depend on for history today, that was a public relations arm of Baird, essentially. So
didn't know that.
History is written by the victors. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
They admit it, and I think it's Malcolm Baird's book. Yeah. Well, this wasn't even the victors. This was the owners. And then they used weasel words. I'm trying to put some of this stuff in the book I'm writing. There's a lot more to it than that, but Baird was a big promoter, just like Sarnoff, except he didn't have Sarnoff's money. And that was, I think, his greatest contribution was to promote television. But of course, number one, his television. And so you get a lot of distortion out of this. And I didn't realize that the patent system doesn't work the way the copyright system does. With copyrights, there are countries that have reciprocity. So copyright here is copyright someplace else. But if you don't dual file in all those other countries, your patent is basically worthless. Wow. Somebody else can invent the same thing and put their name on it. And that's why you have Jenkins inventing right before he died, in the last 3 or 4 years before he died. he did a system of television that was 2 feet across, mechanical television that had storage.
Whoa!
Most people don't know that there was any mechanical television that had storage.
Yeah, I didn't know
and
that.
It was such a good system that Zworkin sued him, and he couldn't market it. But over in England, 2 years later, John Baird invented the same thing, and he could patent it. And there's no prior art section on Baird's patents, so he doesn't explain why his system is different. Now, he toured all over Europe with this system. He was using 2,500 flashlight bulbs or something like that, thousands of flashlight bulbs that Jenkins soldered in there with capacitors across them for storage. Yeah.
Well, how's the storage work? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, the idea is, well, he had a camera too that I don't understand as well, but the camera also had storage. But the idea was, of course, that the screen would stay illuminated after it initialized that particular picture element, and that was Zworkin's secret. And that was Zworkin's secret over mechanical television and Farnsworth's television. That was one of his secrets. The other one over Farnsworth is that Zworkin could be 10 to 100 times more sensitive with his iconoscope.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
But storage was essential because the screen would keep glowing on the CRT at home after the electron beam had passed. But whatever they used
persistence.
Yeah. In terms of Jenkins, it was more addressing because it was all analog and there was no electron beam. It was a bunch of flashlight bulbs in a frame.
That's crazy.
And Baird did the same thing, and he made his that would fit on a trailer, and he took it all over Europe and shut it off. But it was about the same number of bulbs, and they had a commutator instead of an electron beam. It just went around. They stole that idea from AT&T. Like, obviously, AT&T didn't invent the commutator either, but that was what AT&T used for its 1927 display of large screen television, 2 by 3 feet, in 1927. So, I mean, mechanical television is a lot greater than just the folk television that people see that they built in their homes. Mm-hmm. But that was, to me, that was the most important part. That was the bulk of it for about 6 years. And then after that, it advanced tremendously. But there were things that were lost, like this Jenkins invention. He also had another storage system. I won't bore you with that, but
I could listen for hours. You know a lot more about this. Yeah.
Oh, someday I'll do a presentation, but I'm
you should. The electrostatics. I thought the electrostatics were that it was like that. You couldn't expand beyond a certain size because of the loads and so on, and there was no restoration like in the coils and the transformers. But that gets deep into the bits of it. But no, apparently scans you could get bigger than. Wow, it sounds projected almost.
Hey, James, you were talking about the standards converters before. I saw something at the Antique Wireless Association Museum years ago that really piqued my curiosity, and they didn't have a lot of information on it. It was a flat disc, a faceted disc about maybe 2 feet across, and it had polished facets around the edge. And supposedly you would feed a video signal in at TSC and read it out optically as PAL. Anybody know anything about that? Is that a real thing? It was a weird looking thing, and I always wondered about it.
I've never heard of that one. That's very clever sounding.
I got a picture of it someplace here. I couldn't find it just now, but I always thought that was. That was something, but they didn't really have a lot of information on it. So I don't know.
There's always somebody coming up with a new wrinkle, like that PEC system that he did it for Canada. It took over for, they were using a synopsis system up there and they replaced it with a PEC system. I think first they went to 60 lines and then with PEC they went to 180 lines. And I think it was VE9EK. And PEC was an expert on lenses and mirrors and training from the Navy. And his system used a scanning disc that was only 3 or 4 inches across with lenses. It's a lens disc. And he could make 10-inch pictures, or if you turned the TV set around, he had a lens that you could flip a lever and it would project on the wall. It could go up to a couple of feet, 2 or 3 feet. probably wouldn't be as bright, but instead of a crater tube in there, which is what you would expect, he used an automobile headlight bulb through a light valve. And he was going to compete with CRT television. He said, "Oh, CRTs are at 200 lines," and he says, "If I have to, I'll make a better one." I thought, wow. You know? And then he was saying, and then yet CRTs, you got that green picture. It's really small. You got all this extra, all the electronics. The tube only lasts for 1,000 hours. He says they cost a lot of money to replace the CRT. With us, it's a 79-cent bulb from a car in here, you know. And he said the light valve doesn't cost that much either. So I mean, there were advantages. I've read a whole article on it at home. All the advantages of mechanical television over electronic television. A wonderful viewpoint. It's so contrary to anything else you've heard about it.
Dave, that ring you were talking about, that's some kind of optical thing?
Supposedly.
Because, there were film scanners that had rotating prisms to go from 24 frame per second film to 60 film per second television. But, as a conversion from NTSC to PAL or the other way around, it seems like there's a lot missing if you have just an optical piece of some kind.
Yeah, it didn't make sense to me, but again, you know a heck of a lot better than I would. But I'll find a picture of it, and I'll try to find it and put it up next month. You can see it at least.
Uh-huh.
There were projectors used on the early color flying spot scanner film systems, particularly from GE, that used a wobbling mirror, so it did never shut the light off going out the lens. It came through the CRT and went into photomultipliers. But on all those flying spot scanner systems that Dumont and GE and Philco made back in the early 50s for color TV, used some kind of either rotating mirrors or wobbling mirrors. The GE claimed their wobbling mirrors had much more light output than the rotating prism that was on the Dumont. And I don't know what Philco used. Philco used a Mitchell 16 millimeter projectors, and I don't know how they stabilized the image for their flying spot scanner. That was just normal 24 frame 16 millimeter film on a 60 hertz system.
I'm sure I've got textbooks or a textbook somewhere that talks about rapid pull down projectors that I guess had to be used with an iconoscope, but the idea is that you would flash the film frame 3 times, and because the iconoscope was a storage tube, you could scan that last flash while the film was being pulled down. And then the next time you would flash it twice, so you would have a 3-2 pull down. But it depended on the storage characteristics of the iconoscope.
Yeah, the TK20 this DK20 iconoscope film chains all ran in the mode where the TP16 projector, and you've got one at the ETF Museum, and they had a very narrow opening in the shutter, and it was phased through the power line. The sync generator was locked to 60 hertz power, and the motor in the TP16 is a 3-phase synchronous motor, and the motor is phased, and there's a phasing knob on the sync gen, and you had to flash the iconoscope during vertical blanking. You couldn't flash it during pull down or any time. I guess the film is stable. They open the shutter on the 16 and then flash one frame onto the iconoscope. There's probably an RC broadcast news a picture of how that worked. When they came out with the TP6, it had interestingly on it, the shutter motor and the projector motor drive were not the same motor. They were independent, and the shutter motor, although it was synchronous, it would just sit there and spin down. But the the iconoscopes only worked by flashing. There was also RCA and GE both made projectors for the iconoscopes where they used a strobe lamp in the projector and just fired the strobe light during vertical blanking to flash the iconoscope. I've not heard. That would be really interesting to see a iconoscope color camera of some kind, or if they actually did that. But I know one of the other systems that was used in the early days of conversion of film to TV was Motorola had a system called Jump Scan, where they ran the film continuously, and then the trace on a CRT moved vertically to follow the film and then electronically jump back up to some other position on the CRT. I don't know if you've run across that. There was a guy named Kurt something, I can't think of his name now, patented that at Motorola back in the early 50s.
Yeah.
Kurt Schlesinger.
Oh, the name is familiar.
Yeah, he invented a lot of stuff at Motorola in TV.
Yeah. Regarding, you mentioned color with an iconoscope, and actually that would have been impossible because the iconoscope is basically an AC coupled device, and therefore the black level in the three color channels would drift all over the place, depending on, if there was a lot of red, then the black in the red channel would be depressed, and if there was little red, it would rise up and develop a pink fog. So the iconoscope, besides being impractically bulky, just couldn't be used for color because the balance between the three primary channels would change.
I agree. It was hard enough to keep a iconoscope working on a black and white film. The shading varied all over the place as the picture changed on the, on the film. And so you almost had to, certainly if you were changing slides or something, you'd change a slide, you'd have to run over and reshade the TK20 because it would be way off, just due to the image on the 35 millimeter slides that we had for TV back then. But they're, so that wouldn't have worked. But the interesting thing was, I know RCA came out with a flying spot scanner, and I think ETF now has a piece of one. They made a really fast pull down projector that was synchronized to vertical sync and used big tubes to drive the projector motor. And that was a flying spot scanner that RCA built called the TK25. And the TK25, I bet they didn't sell very many of those, maybe one or two. But then they came out with the Vidicon in that era in like 1954, and because of the storage characteristics of the Vidicon, then they could have a film chain and not really have to synchronize the film projector to the 60 hertz power line, and that was the TK26, which they sold a lot, and those things were used for decades after they were installed.
Yeah, the thing about the Vidicons, which wasn't really reduced until the Plumicons came along, is that they not only were they storage devices, but they had tremendous lag.
Yeah, they were storage, like all tubes like that. Yeah. Yes, the lag was capitalized on for use in film projection, so you didn't have that flicker between the 3-tube pull down and the 60 hertz.
Yeah, but it was excessive. I remember clearly, the local stations, before Turner bought up all the film rights, the local stations used to run 16 millimeter copies on, the Saturday night movies or whatever, and you'd get a dark scene of the train running through the night, and all you would see is a series of fading images of the headlight. So it was, instead of one headlight, it was a headlight and all its preceding ghosts.
Yeah.
Say, Dave, if you could let me share the screen. I've got the pre-war RCA page up, and I can show people that 1939 Dalek-style projection set.
Yeah, it's the screen sharing is enabled. You should just be able to click the share button.
Okay, the middle row on the far right, you should be seeing the 1939 projection set.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Art Deco alien of some kind. I think it was, well, I saw it as a kid, so I'm going to say it's somewhere around 4 feet or 5 feet tall. And so very, very dim. It was just, as I said, they had it in a room with a light baffled maze that you had to walk through to get in, and then you would stand there and wait for your eyes to adjust. And they were projecting a picture of the people in the exhibit seeing themselves on black and white TV.
On the film to television converters, I have an article. Unfortunately, I can't find the source of the article, but it is talking about a European system that uses an iconoscope in a system of rotating and wiggling mirrors. The film doesn't have an intermittent movement. It's continuous. And then this thing picks it up with this odd system with a disc that has wobbling mirrors on it. Oscillating mirrors, they're calling them. It's a very strange shape, too. It's a very strange shape. The iconoscope is in a box. It's facing downward in the box, and then the plate of it faces the lens system that goes into the movie projector through a series of mirrors. And then it's got this wobbling mirror section at the bottom of that reflects this image outward. It's all driven by several motors. Very odd. It's called flickerless film television.
The ETF has a Kodak continuous motion film 16 millimeter projector on a pedestal in there by the remote truck that was built by Eastman Kodak in Rochester. It's a like I said, it's a continuous motion machine and has a wobbling mirror.
Yeah, so maybe that comes out of this thing. This is very unusual. I accidentally printed this article. It's been sitting in my printer tray, and I just happened to find it today.
Yeah, continuous motion projectors are always touted to be gentler on the film, specifically gentler on the sprocket holes. But the intermittent projectors actually pick the film up off the gate and move it and put it back down in place, which is a lot easier on the image part of the film than dragging it through any kind of mechanism continuously. So the the mechanism had to be carefully designed to not produce any scraping on the image part of the film. And if you look at the IMAX projector systems, they actually do an inchworm kind of thing where they buckle up a portion of the film and then roll it through past the gate, and then the next frame comes down in contact with the gate. So the motion of the film with respect to the gate is just rolling it down flat and not dragging it over the edges.
Mm-hmm. They're very clever. Yeah. Of course, when I was in my internship in New York, almost every station that we went to, especially the ones that use a lot of film, had wet gates besides because of all the scratches. But I was surprised at how many of the TV stations still were using 35 millimeter. Of course, that was a long time ago.
It was expensive to set up too because of handling nitrate film. I believe in Chicago, WGN had 35 millimeter capability, but I think it was the only station. I think everybody else was 16 only.
That would be for film origination. These were, I'm thinking of, movies, regular Hollywood movies. So it was probably
yes.
It was, they were receiving in preference to 16 millimeter. They were getting the 35, and I thought, wow, you're taking this down to 525 lines in those days. What would be the difference? But there must have been some considerable difference in grain, of course, and then wet gate besides. It was beautiful stuff, and of course they could afford the best, and as long as they maintained it, it'd be great.
Networks like NBC ran some commercials on 35 millimeter for the network with 16 millimeter backup. And of course, the feature movies were run on 35 millimeter, and NBC, and I think CBS and ABC also, but I know NBC had a film projection area with two film chains in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, and then they microwaved the signal back to Rockefeller Center. And the reason was there's a tax in New York City of projecting 35 millimeter feature films, and they charge per viewer. So a television audience would have an awfully big tax on it. So the networks put the film chains in New Jersey to run 35 millimeter feature prints.
Once again, a beautiful example of working around the regulations and designing a technology that will do that. It shows how the legal side of things affects development of technology, which is fascinating.
Yeah, there are many examples, and people like the French architecture with the mansard roofs. The reason for the mansard roofs was not the style; it was because the buildings were taxed on the number of floors below the roof line. So they built buildings with the top floor with the mansard roof extending over the top floor.
That's funny. I'm going to be a lot more interesting at the next cocktail party now.
Yeah, I think I first started thinking about this when I was hearing about the Amish and their extreme feelings about turning the clock back to 1840 and just keeping it there, and then how various Amish groups could get around the bishop's regulations because they're not all unified. They're all a little bit different from each other. And they had all sorts of unusual things that they had invented that were still legal that they could do to make their farming efforts more effective or more profitable. And all based on regulations. Once again, I said, we could be looking at the Amish and saying how silly this is, but we would have to look in the mirror then and realize that we're doing the very same thing.
I got a general question. Does anybody here do repair? They, take a set that's dusted and clean it off and get it running. Is there any of that going on around in the group here, or the collectors? Or I'm new here, so I don't really know.
Well, there's a fair amount of that. I don't know if anybody that's on the meeting right now does that. I do that, but again, on Video Karma and Antique Radio, Antique Radio's website and the Facebook Vintage Television groups. There's a hundreds of people that are into that across the country. Sure.
Okay, you must have somebody for the museum or people for the museum that help you out. No.
Well,
okay.
Steve has done a lot of it, and then there's a couple of guys that were on the call here that have, done some various things. I saw James O'Neill's name there. I don't know if James is still with us. James was working on the TK41 camera a while ago, which is something that's way beyond most people's capabilities of doing. George is still on the call there. George does a lot of the cameras and 2-inch quad type of stuff for another museum. But your garden variety 630 TS stuff and whatever, that's it's a niche hobby, but there's a bunch of people that are into it. But for the museum, there were a couple of guys that did bits and pieces here and there, but whatever reason they moved away. A lot of guys passed away. Steve's been doing most of it, lately.
Okay.
And he stopped, actually. He's not doing that anymore. So we're in a crisis mode right now, I guess, in terms of not having anybody to keep the sets going currently. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, considering how spread out everybody is, you'd have to ship them around the country.
Well,
that gets problematic. Yeah. I see that. Okay.
Yeah,
the cameras are interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when we get together every May is the one time during the year when everybody gets together. I mean, people come from all over the country and all over the world, descending on suburban Columbus, Ohio area. But otherwise, it's tough running a national museum when, people are scattered around the nation.
Another aspect.
Go ahead.
Another aspect that you didn't bring up was sort of kind of a specialty is cabinet restoration. The thing has to look good to attract views. Yeah. And I know that Steve once had, because I read it someplace online, that he had a guy that restored his cabinets. And I thought, I can go in there and replace capacitors, for example, or in high voltage cup. I replaced that on one set. Found one in a Dumont black and white that worked fine in my color set, one of my RCA color sets.
Wow, that's pretty good.
But yeah, I was lucky. But anyway, the cabinets are real important for Steve. One time he has the Empire State Sanabria, very rare Sanabria set, and I looked at it and I said, "Boy, this has a lot of dings and scratches and dust on it." And I photoshopped it, sent it back to him.
Yeah.
It looks brand new.
I think what happens is that a lot of people come into this hobby on one level or another. They're retired engineers, retired broadcast people, retired TV repair people, retired Bell Labs people, and that's what brings them in. We don't get a lot of retired woodworkers. So it's the skill set is heavily weighted towards the electronics restoration. And then we got some people that just collect the stuff because it looks cool, and they put it on display as non-working displays. I mean, I have to admit, most of mine are non-working. I mean, there's just not enough hours in the day to get to them all. But there are a couple of good cabinet people out there, but damn few that we know of that do this type of work.
Well, I have a very short story. I found a AT-241 in Arkansas in the back out in the grass on hay. It was being rained on.
Ooh.
And it rained until when I got to it, the veneer was all gone, mostly gone. You could peel it off like I don't know, eggshell or something. And over a period of time, I've completely restored it, re-veneered it, and it is a job. But I was doing that because I couldn't get a 630 TS. They don't really fall in your lap. And I happened to have a friend who said, "Hey, look on eBay." And there was a fella up in Wisconsin who was an RCA technician back in the 40s, and he bought it for his mother. And I'm wandering off my topic. I don't want to do that.
No, that's right.
But the 630, I mean the AT241, they're not hard to get running. Most of them are, at least the RCA. Some of the quality of materials and some of this stuff is just amazing compared to what some of the junk I see today.
They're good, solid performers. All of those 630 based sets. Yeah. Where are you located?
Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't mean to sound arrogant about it at all, but we're just drowning in stuff out here in the New York, New Jersey area. I mean, I can't tell you how many 630s I've found. I have. Well, I mean, one is really more than anyone needs, and I have several more than one. But one of them, I had it in storage, and it developed a leak in the roof, and all my veneer peeled off one side of the cabinet. So that was very depressing.
Yeah. And you can get it back. I did. I bought the veneer and redid it, and you got to be patient. And I did it's a boat varnish, but it actually works. And I was surprised it worked. I was kind of like, oh, this is going to be too shiny, but it came out pretty well. Anyway, I'm terribly digressing. That's not what you all want to hear. But out in the middle of the country, sets are extremely rare. And what you do is you pick them off from the coast because most of television was back east and, in the early days. And they really haven't migrated to the west that much. So, if I find, as you say, you're drowning in 630 TSs, that's the first time I've heard that. And this one, I didn't have to restore it. It's been in a house for the whole 70 years. Plus that it's like, I can't believe how vintage this, how intact it is, because I just restored the AT241 and it was in pieces. And so, I kind of know the difference, but you have to take them one by one, and they do eat you up a lot of time. And so you kind of pick one that is going to be your pet. Anyway, I'll stop blathering on. It's just fascinating.
That's the part of the meeting right now where we're just, before we roll up the sidewalks, we go off in all different directions. Who's the worst possible situation to be a collector of vintage televisions or anything like that? I don't sell much stuff. It seems to come in and never go out again. Kind of black hole. Yeah. But I put up an oscilloscope, and it was a crappy old ICO 5-inch oscilloscope many years ago. This was. I put it up on eBay because I said, I got 6 of these, and nobody wants even one of them anymore. So what? I got to get rid of this thing, and I put it up there, and a fella bought it from me and on eBay. And when I checked the shipping, I forget what he paid, $15 or something. He bid on it. The shipping was going to be like $72. And he was in Hawaii. And I called him up and I said, I don't think you really want this thing because the shipping is going to be a killer, and it's perfectly okay with me if you want to just cancel the sale. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, we don't have anything out here. Everything we want to collect, we have to bring in. So I guess that's, that's the downside of living in paradise. I don't know.
I guess it is. Out in the plains, it's the same thing. There's very few here at all to pick from. So I've got a friend who collects them in Tulsa, and I'm helping him with a Philco, and the tuner caught on fire. There's no other way to say it. And this thing is just resisting us. But anyway, Dave, I appreciate you taking a few minutes. I've been wondering about the museum for a while. I check in. I use a lot of the schematics. You guys have wonderful documentation for the television side of things. You said that's very niche, but I have a feeling the cameras are very niche. Everybody's got their corner, and just incredible amount of talent sitting here, and wondering how that all gets put together. Well, thank you for your museum. It's one way to gather it in one place. And it looks like I'm going to have to make the annual meeting. That's what it looks like.
Steve is very modest, but I mean, he put that together pretty much single-handedly. So that was quite a project, and it was quite generous of him too, because he up until recently, when the museum's always been a nonprofit, but it's become a separate entity. But up until just 5 years ago or so, it was funded entirely by him and his family. So he's really made a commitment to this hobby like no one else has.
I hope to talk to him sometime. But is there anything the museum wants that it can't find, or does it have everything it needs?
No, there's always there's all kinds of things, bits and pieces of things that are out there. Do we have a want list? No, I don't. I don't know that we have a want list, but there are. And then anything that I mean, people bring stuff by all the time, and that, no, I mean, well, yeah, that's a good thing and a bad thing, but anything that's surplus to our needs gets auctioned off, and the funds go to support the operation of the museum. That's how it goes with museums. So that works out really well too.
Yeah.
The TRK5 that came in is surplus to our needs because we have one already. So that's a scarcer than hen's teeth thing that now all of a sudden we got two, and most people have never even seen one. So,
well, I've got to go back to the site. I remember it, but I got to look that over. You do have a video tour. Do a lot of the things at the museum run, or is it about 50-50? Or I don't see them running. There's a video tour that you all put together a few years ago. It takes you through the museum. Very nice. But I got to wandering.
Yeah, there's a number of people that have come through with cameras. I actually got to prevail on a guy named Stan LeVar who came in. Stan was the fellow who was responsible for running the team that built the Apollo 11 moon camera. And Stan came out and visited us and gave a speech. And Steve gave him a personal tour through the museum. And we made a video of that. So you kind of got to follow Stan around and see what he saw as he went through the museum. So maybe that may be what you're thinking of. Or
I think it's what I'm thinking of. Yeah,
it may be another one. But yeah, in terms of anything that we're looking for, I mean, if you have something that's surplus to your needs, it could possibly support the museum's operations. But on the other hand, I'm associated with the museum here in New Jersey and also with the museum in Hilliard, and it does happen that people do show up unannounced and they say, we have this wonderful thing here, and sometimes they're trying to sell it to you, and sometimes they want to leave it with you because they don't know what to do with it, and you look at it, you go, I'm sorry, we can't use that. And then you go back inside and you come out later on and all of a sudden they dropped it off at your doorstep. That was, very unwelcome stuff shows up sometimes.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Occupation.
Well, I guess I was hoping there are things that, and I don't know if there's a museum in Jersey. This one's, I think, in Ohio. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
The early television museum. Yeah. Yeah. But I wonder how much of it actually works. I mean, it's got to be a real manpower to try to get all that working.
It's a rolling series of working, not working. But I guess at one point we had most things were working. I mean, there's a few sets that can't work because there's pieces missing that simply don't exist. But Steve's gone so far as to build sections or subsections of some of the things that were missing and were never going to become available. He reverse engineered them and put them together again. So that's kind of neat. But most of the sets, the vast majority of the sets either do work or did work and are on the bench to come back to life again now. So try to keep everything running so people can get the experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate the time. We got anybody left here? Let's see. Looks like Joe's here. Hi, Joe.
think a lot of people
trying to unmute here.
wander away.
Trying to unmute here. The
Me too.
Something occurred to me, like my wife made me take a, I don't know, 25-year-old TV analog, perfectly working, I don't know, 23-inch or something like that to recycle, to get rid of. That broke my heart because it worked fine. Remote. I put it on Craigslist. They have here. Nobody wanted it. Occurred to me, like, if you could get a good sized, dry, nice building and just took all these TVs that are just free right now, that are working and in good condition, that in like 50 years, they'd be something, like that. Yeah. It's like all the things you got now that you have to fix, that if once in a while they're just left alone and they're fine.
There is a thing that happened while none of us were paying attention. Any CRT, particularly any of the high-end ones, the Sony broadcast monitors and whatnot, have become very popular items amongst the retro gaming crowd, because the old 8-bit games either do not work well or do not work at all on LCD screens. They want to work on a CRT television with real scanning and real scan lines. For example, if you have a light pistol or something, that just will not work apparently on a current generation television. So I have a couple of broadcast monitors that I stashed away and are still in storage, just because I'm too lazy to have gotten rid of them and recycled them. And apparently they're worth like $1,000 a piece now to the gamers. So go figure. Go figure.
You mentioned
Go ahead, Joe.
You mentioned the Amish, okay? And I'm thinking like a Amish 2.0. And what you do, you have analog TVs. You don't have the internet. You have DOS computers. You have film cameras. Maybe you're stuck in, like, I don't know, 1982 or something like that. You pick a year and you say, well, this is where we're going to have a whole society like that. We're going to be off by ourselves. Yeah. We're going to stay there, like that era.
Yeah.
The sort of thing that tape recorders, stuff like that.
Just about everybody has something around like that, yeah.
Things that we get our hands on, and do something with it.
I was doing this when I was 10, and that's how I got into engineering. My grandpa was a technician, and he taught me before I could, know any better, I guess. And he had me drawing tube circuits and so on. And of course, my transition was to transistors and ICs and ASICs, application-specific ICs. And so I remember, I'm going to be careful, I'm 66, but I do remember some of the early 60s stuff. I don't remember the 50s, but there were a few late 50s televisions around because of him. So I remember when these were, out of the gate and maybe 5, 10, 15 years old. And it's amazing just how the fidelity is to being able to produce an image on it. That's why I was talking about the 525 to the 405 conversion. I didn't realize it was being done in chips. That alone would be fascinating to me. But I hope to get a 30 set. They are thousands and 10,000, is what I see when you can find them. So the odds of that, that's why I keep mentioning, what does the museum want? They probably have one. Or 2 or 3, like the one that was exhibited at the World's Fair in '39. But anyway, go ahead.
What you got to do is, it would be cheaper for you to move to New Jersey, because I have 3 pre-war sets, and the 3 of them together cost me $55. But you got to be unconscionably lucky. You just got to be, hellishly lucky. You just no one could ever plan for something like that to happen.
That's my 630 TS. I was seeing 2 or 3 on eBay for $300, $400, $500, $600, and they'd have to be restored. And this fellow wanted one for $155, but you know what the shipping was? $450.
Yeah,
So
and he's probably losing money at that.
I paid it. I mean, they're that hard to find out here. And I've been waiting 10 years. And it's like, so I restored the AT241, which is right over there. And it runs great. And I think, well, okay, I know,
almost the same set.
Almost. It's actually the grandchild, and a lot of the parts are missing. The whole thing, I don't know if you've done this, but there's a whole journey in how the sets evolve from the early circuitry and how much gets eliminated and how much is redone. And then there are gimmicks that they really didn't work that well. But, the eyewitness TV thing with RCA, some of that works all right. And some of it is you're back there tweaking it to keep things stable. And anyway, I don't want to get off in a bunch of detail. But the 630
Well, that's
TS
actually
was,
kind of interesting. I would almost encourage you to maybe put some notes together for a future meeting. The idea of how the set's evolved or devolved, as the case may be. I don't know anything about that. And I've been playing around with this stuff for 50 years.
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you got 4-stage IF, drops it to 3. You've got circuitry that double redundancies on the sync clipper or sync separators. You don't need it. It's double sync amplifiers. That's great. But, I think they were trying to plan for way out stations in the distance. Yeah. They're trying to pull in stations that are way far away, and you need that sync stability for that. And the other part of it is, this being you're in New Jersey, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This, some sets were configured only for certain channels in that certain area. And Philco tried to get around that by spanning like there is channel 2 is actually 1-2. And the 630 TS has channel 1, but it's set. And if you read into the old rider's manuals, that we have several really thick rider's manuals, the history's in there. It talks about, well, if you're going to distribute to New Jersey, it's these set of stations, and you order those set of stations on your television. Whereas if you did it on Chicago, you'd have a different set of stations that might overlap, they might not. And about the is it the 4 and 5? Yeah, there's a 4-5 can't be in the same, as I recall sitting here, can't be in the same town. But the tuners were actually custom to the area or region that they were being shipped to. Mm-hmm. And it just goes on like that. And I'm just sitting here reading, and my jaw's on the floor. Now, I don't know what your scan rate is for those early 30s televisions. I'm kind of fascinated as to what was the sweep rate for the horizontal sweep. It must have been slower.
It was a little slower. There were 441 lines of vertical, and I don't remember the.
It's like 12,000.
Yeah, but the horizontal was a little bit less. But that's what Steve was just saying. All the pre-war sets in the museum are just set up to be they're misadjusted slightly so that they lock in on the NTSC 2 525 lines.
It will actually capture it.
Apparently, all of the sets have enough wiggle room in their adjustments to do that. Yeah,
it doesn't affect the high voltage. That's interesting. I should think there'd be a change in high voltage, but there's a big range for the CRT to operate at. You can go from a 10. Go ahead.
If they're pretty crude. They're pretty crude devices. I have a little Andrea 5-inch pre-war set here, and if you look at it, if you take the picture tube away and you look at it, it looks like a 1930s radio. And there really isn't much more to it than a 1930s radio. It's charmingly primitive.
A lot of the European sets were that way. The ones in England, because they were doing it before we were. And if you go inside, I've had a chance to find people who take pictures. They look like radios, except for they have this little specialized section. And we're talking, second anode voltages, 3,000-4,000 volts, really low.
They were over-engineered too. I mean, if you look at the power supplies in those early sets, they were all 60 cycle power supplies. So they had, they didn't have any regulation problems, I don't think.
Dave, you're refreshing to talk to. I don't have anybody that understands what I'm saying.
They could kill you, but they.
Yeah. The thing about that is no isolation. There was no isolation. So I don't know if that's true in every case, but I don't know why they didn't use transformers. But
there were transformers in the sets, but the the 60 cycles at 2,000 volts will kill you instantly.
Yeah.
Whereas the flyback sets will get your attention, but I don't think too many people have died from getting
microamps. Yeah, it's microamps. No, as I was speaking, I realized I have a kit scope that puts out 3,000 volts at 60 hertz, and I was adjusting a back pot, and it jumped over to my arm, and I waited an hour. My arm ached, and I was lucky that okay, we're not doing that again. And things happen to you. But in the color sets, they run at 30, 40,000 volts. I've been hit by that not running, and it'll knock you against the wall. But again, you survive. But you're talking about something 60 hertz secondary right off the main lines. And you got to watch that. And several sets in Europe, they will run for an hour or two, and that's the only playtime you get. And then it begins to degrade. So all this stuff's real tricky. But I'm impressed to hear you've got an Andrea. I've been reading about it. I've got schematics for an Andrea, and you can sit there and look at how it's designed, and a lot of them are electrostatic based. The early sets a lot of them were electrostatic. There are a few that have yokes, but they actually came along later. So what I wound up finding is that, I don't want to get into the engineering about electrostatic. There's a lot of energy losses there, whereas the flyback transformer actually stores it. And then it turns around and stores in the nonlinear linear capacitors that hang off the flyback. So as it gives up the energy in the yoke, it passes it to the caps, and the caps finish the sweep. And the whole thing is a handoff operation. And I'd love to describe that better than I can sitting here, but it's cool.
Well, that was pretty good. It was certainly better than I could. But those old guys were pretty smart, weren't they?
They were very smart. You think of a coil like a spring. You throw energy into it. It's going to hold it for those milliseconds we're talking about. It's very fast. Like 63 microseconds. Actually, it's microseconds. And in that short duration, that sucker's a battery. And then it gives it up. And then as the sweep from the horizontal output begins to rise, it meets the decay from the yoke. So there's those two are both nonlinear, but when you mix them, you get a linear sweep. So as the beam meets the center of the screen, it stays linear.
Now imagine that had never been done before, and you're the guy who had to think that up. That's pretty smart. That's pretty sharp.
Well, the fascinating there is you dig into the history. It's actually several guys, and they have at least enough. They get along well enough they can share their ideas, but the early history is just, and you can see it in the designs. You just look at the schematics and you go, well, they're going from here to here, and here's what they're dropping, and here's a gimmick that they've added. And I've never seen anything with 2-sync amplifiers. I know what they're doing. They're trying to pull in really far away stations. You got somebody down in Illinois who would like to grab some Chicago because there's no station around in those days. So there's all these techniques to try to see how to get something on your set when you're pretty much out of range. But anyway, you're letting me blather on. I'll stop.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Well, that's what we do here. We somebody described it to me one time. They said, "Do you know why we gather like this?" I said, "No, I don't know why. Why do we gather like this? We gather like this to convince each other that this is normal behavior."
No, I have a real life. I always go back to that one, so I'm not too weird.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Yeah.
Dave, this is James again. The Andrea set that you have, is that old enough to have AM sound on it?
I believe all of the pre-war sets had AM sound. I don't believe any had FM sound.
Yeah, so that came later. Yeah.
And that's the whole conflict between Sarnoff and Armstrong, and the whole thing that was in the Empire of the Air book, which is interesting.
Yeah. Armstrong's tragic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sarnoff did that to a lot of people. Yeah. He had his own genius, but these guys came into conflict. He took what he wanted and needed, and of course, he destroyed Farnsworth too. It took many years for him to become an alcoholic and so forth. The other thing is, do you have an Andrea kit set?
I don't, but the museum has a empty box for a kit set. I don't know if it's an Andrea. No, I don't think it's an Andrea. Might be that one of our guys here found. And I think we might have one in New Jersey too. I don't remember now off the top of my head, but those are also scarce as hen's teeth. I'm not even sure I've ever seen a fully. Oh, I'm sorry. You're asking me an assembled one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think I think there is one in the museum. It's the same set. It's just the factory built versus kit and also the cabinets. There's a nice finished cabinet on the factory set and the little plywood panel for the kit set.
Yeah, I've seen there's every variety with Meisner and had one and Pilot and Andrea, and there were 2 or 3 others.
I got a Transvision set that was a kit set also. It's a 12-inch set, much later, but that was a kit. So there was a lot of opportunities out there to get involved in that. And I've got an NRI kit set also. You would sign up for NRI, National Radio Institute. And they
took some courses.
Send you the books and the parts, and supposedly you'd be a TV repair guy when you graduated.
Yeah,
maybe.
I know a guy that started that. That's all he did was start.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what happened to a
Sarnoff.
lot of them. Yeah.
You mentioned Sarnoff. I did a talk on television, early, present, future. And when I showed his picture, I said, "This man is the devil."
You can say that, but I think if you dig in, again behind the stories that get shared now, and you go back to the original sources, or you go back to people that were actually there. Sarnoff was I'm associated with the David Sarnoff Library in Princeton, New Jersey, also. So he was probably not the kind of person who I'd ever want to have over for dinner, and he would probably not ever want to invite me over for dinner. Yeah. But he was a hard-nosed businessman, and he was a lead follower, get out of the way kind of a person, and he was going to take every advantage that he could find. I was going to say legal or otherwise, but I think he tended to obey the law. But the law lets you steamroll over people sometimes. He was a respected military officer. People think that he got his commission as a general just because he knew somebody, but he legitimately served during World War II, and he had a lot of value to bring to the country for that. He rolled right over people, but doesn't Steve Jobs, and doesn't Google, and everybody. If your interest is in dominating an industry and making as much money as you can, a lot of those niceties tend to get overlooked. So I don't think he's quite the devil that he was painted out to be. I mean, devil-ish maybe, but I think he look at it this way. He had his issues with Farnsworth, but Farnsworth didn't have a lot of his technology wasn't going to be up to snuff, but he didn't have the resources to do a lot either. Sarnoff basically willed the television industry into being. He built the industry. He built the studios. He built the cameras. He built the
You're right.
the dealerships.
Absolutely.
So who else was going to do that except an iron-willed, iron-fisted kind of a guy like that? I don't. You can criticize him, but I don't think you can hate him.
No, we're talking. I think that the divide is between a man that it was unique, and you can't judge him on the same standards as other people. But he also invented the industry. Where would we be with television without Sarnoff supporting Zworykin? Where would we be with color television without him supporting the group of people that made all the color devices? And you could see, if you don't believe that, look what happened to RCA after he turned the company over to his son. You know, there are only so many people that can be Bill Gates or Elon Musk or some other people, and I'm sure that you probably would have trouble eating dinner with those people too. It's
well, Gates almost seems to have redeemed himself in his latter part of his life, but yeah, maybe not. But yeah, it's there's two sides to every story, and maybe more than two.
Yeah.
So well, yeah. Was there anybody in Europe like that was like Sarnoff? I mean, it wasn't all U.S., was it?
No, the people that I'm looking at in Europe, though, are mostly engineers. So they're not. I mean, Baird was entrepreneurial, and then they had the War of the Standards in England, and he was claiming that he was a native son, and that Her Majesty's Voice was largely infiltrated by Sarnoff, who sat on the board.
Oh wow! Didn't know that.
HMV was part of EMI, which had a contest. But the thing was, by that time, Baird wasn't Baird anymore. He was Gaumont Studios, which was another conglomerate. So it was really a battle between two conglomerates. So it was a totally nonsense story. But for public relations purposes, once again, looking at the positive side, Baird had tremendous skill in promoting television. So with all of his foibles, it's just like with Sarnoff, he had positive features that were very powerful. The stories about him today, though, are mostly garbage.
Yeah, I believe that. Well, not only that, this stuff takes on a life of its own. You may start a company, but they can kick you off of it.
You get more with a kind word and a gun than you do with a kind word.
Absolutely.
And like, look at Vanderbilt. He built the railroads all by himself. He built all the track, put all the nails, did it all by himself. Oh yeah, Sarnoff and a lot of people were certainly the motivators, brought it together. And if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have TV, right? No, it just somebody else would do it, take a different track. Who knows, how it would come together and what long it would take and what we'd have and what we wouldn't have, that sort of thing. But yeah, people get to be bosses. Well, let's see, the computer guy, Gates, all right? Yeah. He was just working his ass off, coming up with DOS, I guess. And they said the big thing that really made him go with Microsoft was Windows, with that. And that he was, Kodak was doing Windows, and he just went in and they just showed it to him. Just like, here it is.
Joe, you know the history. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He ran with
the history. They were doing paper white, and they were doing, the screen wasn't widescreen, it was vertical. And they went and grabbed a lot of the stuff off the interface from the Xerox. My background is I was in a university for 20 years in computers, and believe me, you get a lot of the history. He got a lot of that from Xerox.
Yeah, bringing it to market is a big thing. You could have all kinds of ideas and stuff. And if you don't promote it, you don't go with it, nothing happens. I've been in just small groups, and they were all off going to go in a direction. And I had to really push to get a simple thing done like that. And then they did it, and it's amazing if you push what you can get with that. But as long as it's not too far off the rails or something screwy, and it wasn't.
No. Helps to be 40 years younger. Go ahead.
You can always tell if you have a good idea because suddenly everybody's against you, and they have a better idea that your idea that they've renamed or something. So that's part of leadership. That's what you learn, and I don't know who would. I don't think you'd find another Sarnoff myself, but if you did, he would probably be the same type of person.
What the hell was I in a Hilton hotel or something? One of the ones, and it had a book in there. This was before there was anything on TV, HBO or anything. And it was a book, I think, on Hilton. And I read the thing, and it wasn't a thick book, and it was all the failures he had before he got to where it was. But so out of the people, they fail a lot before they just don't give up until they get something. So that's a lot of it too, just persistence. Keep trying a different way, another way, and a lot of rough times. Very few of them have it smooth. You want to have it smooth. That's not true anymore. You want to have it smooth. Go to work for an electric utility. That's what I did. Sat on my ass for 35 years. Collect my pension since 2001. With that. So didn't take any risk. Can't do that anymore. Oh, everything is changing all the time.
Well, there hasn't been any big discoveries in a while.
Well, not that we're aware of.
Not that we're being allowed to be aware of. Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah. Most things aren't known as soon as a lot of things are put out there, but they're not. They got a long way to go, So you hear about it, people think it's going to happen.
We don't manufacture so many things in this country anymore, but all of the intellectual property and the software, I think a lot of it still originates here. I don't know if any of you guys have been following this artificial intelligence out there, but with the artificial intelligence that creates artwork and paintings, and it's writing. I got friends that are college professors are saying it's become very, very difficult to tell whether a student had AI write their paper or whether they wrote it themselves. It writes songs now that are not too bad. So I'd say that's a pretty big deal.
Oh yeah. That's coming. It's here.
My professors at OSU, they were just absolutely having a hard time because it looks so authentic, and they wound up in some kind of binding arbitration to get out of it. But yes, you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
There was an article in the Wall Street Journal last Monday by Andy Kessler at first of the opinion pages about something called Chat GPT.
That's what we're talking about. Yeah,
that's it.
Well, that concerns me because of my career in technical writing for years and years before that advertising. But Andy says you can give it an assignment. It will not only match, it will not only do the research, but it will also try and match your style. And he says he gave it the assignment to write a column in the style of Andy Kessler. He said it performed only up to the level of a high school freshman, but that doesn't mean that 2 years from now it won't be to a college freshman level.
Just to play around with it, and I'm not. You have to be very, very skilled in order to get really high level results out of these things. You have to know how to ask them things, and I'm none of that. But I just to try to stress test it, I asked it to write me a song about the New Jersey Antique Radio Club in Chinese. It did, and it was not a bad song. So we're in a lot of trouble.
So you can read Chinese then, or you can understand Chinese.
I had a friend check.
Oh, okay.
I had Google Translate do the first check, and then I had a real person check, and they did not. I didn't tell them that AI created it, and they said, "Oh, this isn't too bad. Where'd you get this from?" And I'm going like, "You're not going to want to hear this."
I'd like to see it. I like to see it write instruction manuals. And
I would. That's my business.
Well, I'm saying I don't know how it would come out here. You're trying to communicate with a person like that. Here's one I can remember in college where they said, write a paper that tells somebody how to tie a tie, a long tie, like around your neck and all that sort of stuff, instructions on how to do that. And you should read instructions, and they're like, of course, a lot of them are written in China and all that. So,
all right. So tell you what, Joe, come on a meeting next month and ask me, because as soon as we hang up here, I'm going to go on and I'm going to ask it to write me an instruction manual on how to tie a tie.
There you go. Yeah, see what happens. I remember I had an instruction manual. I had a Commodore 128, and it had disk drives for it. And it had a thing in there. It was supposed to say to put in a shifted space, okay? And it said put in a shitted space. So forever, whoever wrote that thing,
oh God,
didn't proofread. Or I'd be on a telephone with somebody. We had mainframes, and I say type blank, and they go BLANK, with that, because you couldn't see them, things like that. So it's like, Yeah, which way do you do it? Misunderstandings all over the place. I think the artificial intelligence where we need it is for the automatic cars, autonomous cars. I think us old guys can really use it, with that, along with the drunks and the distracted and the people that are mad and stupid and everything else. Some people are afraid of it. I said, it's got to be better than what we got now. People driving cars they can't see, that all the other problems they have.
I think computers have caused the problem that they're having to solve with the cars. But I agree with you. We should have them as soon as possible if we can figure out a way to ensure that who would be at fault if there was an accident.
Well, you just get insurance, okay? It's like when your house burns down. Who cares how fault it is? You got insurance to pay for it. So you have insurance on the vehicle. So it happens, and it just no fault, with that. But like a tire blows out or something, no difference, They could blame the driver. Of course, they had a bald tire, as they call them. It's their fault. But other than that, I don't see where that'd be a big deal. What's going to make a difference when people are going to want to buy these things? When their insurance rate gets cut in half, with that on liability.
Well, they already have surveillance that supposedly lowers your rate if you put that in there. So
yeah. Well, that's like people that already drive the way they should, I guess. That kind of thing.
Right. Well, nobody's perfect all the time, but then the thing is, I think computers have created some of the problem with texting and cell phones and telematics inside the car. Extra things.
Oh yeah, that's nuts. I remember when I was like 10 years old in the 50s. I said, I asked my father, "Can we get a television in the car?" He said, "You can never put it in front." With that, and it's a television right there. I mean, talk about stupid. That's like the knobs. You'd be able to without looking at them. To go grab them and tune the radio. All you had was an AM radio, and you could feel it like that. So,
hey, Joe, I'm going to read off the screen here now. All right. ChatGPT says, start with the wide end of the tie on your right side, extending about 12 inches below the narrow end. Cross the wide end over the narrow end. Bring the wide end up and over the narrow end again. Bring the wide end down through the loop. Hold the knot loosely with your index finger and bring the wide end over the knot to the left. Bring the wide end up and over the knot, then down through the loop again. I think this was actually too easy because this would have been easy to find.
Well, you think somebody could really follow that didn't tie a tie before?
I remember at 6 years old having a hard time, so maybe not.
If it's in a paragraph, they wrote it the wrong way. I'll tell you that.
That's good. That's right.
Numbered steps, absolutely numbered steps.
Yeah.
But the other thing that it doesn't do is it's relying on information that it already has. When I was technical writing for the games industry, pinball and so on, I had to spend a lot of time talking to engineers and technicians and people in the field and finding out what they knew and then trying to translate it and then getting them to accept that while they were changing the vocabulary of what they meant and then telling them better names for this thing. And we get some very useful arguments, but you'd eventually solve that, of course. And I had to know a lot of what they knew. It helped to be an engineer in the background, But
if there's any baked-in nonsense, you're just going to get nonsense back from it. That's
right.
Sure.
The problem is
you're talking about the iterative refinement. Go ahead.
Management will think of the manuals as an expense where they don't want to pay more than a certain amount, and that makes them look like commodities. I actually had a manager that told me that all the manuals were commodities, which is absolutely absurd on its face. But if you think of it that way, it doesn't matter if you go to the guy in India who was dragging down my business, who wants to write a manual for $50. I mean, I could go to one meeting for $50.
Yeah.
And
what I always used to enjoy, because I wrote and produced video programs for corporations for my whole career, and I referred to my superpower as being able to talk to the people with the pocket protectors and translate that into something that normal people could understand. But
very good.
But one of the things that I most enjoyed was being handed a stack of technical literature and turning it into a video script and then taking it back for approval and having been told, no, that's not accurate. That's not correct. And I said, well, I got that straight from your technical literature. And then they go back and go, oh, we're going to have to fix that. And I can't tell you how many times that happened.
Another thing, another useful skill that a tech writer has that a computer doesn't yet, I'm not saying it will never have it, is the skill of being able to break things and do things wrong when the engineers tell you how to do it, and find out what goes wrong and then report it back for revision. If they're listening, they'll make a change in the technology, instead of what an engineer once told me, well, just tell them not to do that. And I said, that's the first thing they'll do.
No,
think about human nature.
No, you can't do that. No,
you can't fix technology with instruction. So
bucking the system doesn't work.
right. But that's just a deal with personalities like anything else, and that was why I became a team builder. Put a little management into it, and you find the people that are most helpful, and you listen to the grapevine a lot and ask them about that. And eventually, in a real company that really works, you'll get good output that your field people can use, and you'll sell more products, which is good for everybody.
Well, you look at your artificial intelligence and you're kind of awed by that. And that's not so much as that, but when you take somebody ask them just to write a note about a telephone message, and it doesn't make any sense. Something very simple. It's communication. It's very hard. A lot of times people tell you, you know what I mean. No, I don't what you're talking about. I don't know. You know what I mean. So
I worked as an engineer for 40 years, and that was a constant problem. It's like, well, read my mind. Well, I can't read your mind. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put something up and you can shoot it down. We learn to run the flag up and people will blow it down, and then you learn a lot about what they're thinking. And it's iterative refinement. And then I will say, I think your name's James over there. I will say that I worked at a company. It was an energy company. And the manager told me, well, you can tech write, right? I mean, there's nothing to it. I'm the engineer here. No, you can tech write. How about if you do that on the side? Oh, there goes the face. I think you're muted, but there goes the face. And I said no. And I eventually walked off the company and went somewhere else. It was that bad. So, Joe, it's a matter of, can you find the company? Can they communicate? Will they get along long enough to listen to each other? You guys are absolutely spot on. And deciding that this is how it's supposed to be never works. So I've had my 2 cents.
I worked in engineering. Then I went to IT for that. Mm-hmm. And in IT, it was get it done, everything.
Right.
I looked at something. I said, well, here's what happened. I had software for the mainframe. We're supposed to get the same software for the PC. And I put it on the mainframe, and it was getting wrong answers. You could prove it was wrong. And I went to the provider of a supplier, and I said, this is wrong. And they said, well, when we put it on the PC, it'll be right. I said, well, that makes no sense. It's supposed to be the same thing. You get that. And they used to say, well, let's see, idiot, you're an idiot or something like that. Stupidity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I say, what is it when you do the same thing and you get a different result? Then you got a problem, with that. So that's the other side of it. So, but I couldn't wait to retire. I mean, the IT just went. They were just pushing to get it out more than getting it right. One reason I went to work for the utility was when I graduated from a 2-year school, and they had an area manager come and speak to us there. And he said, well, you think you're good. You got an A. You got over 90%. He said, you want your power off 10% of the time? He says, it's on 99.97, and that's not good enough, with that. Yeah. And I thought I was impressed with that. I said, that's a way to think of it. And they did in engineering. They overbuilt everything. And now it's like, well, they're starting to build it up again because things are going to hell here in New York, upstate. Oh. I got all new wires put by my house and everything and all that. So.
Well, you know what you're looking at. Most people don't know what they're looking at.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's slightly disturbing, isn't it?
The big bitch now, they can't get enough people. Nobody get enough people. And they're bitching because their bills are screwed up. the bills are screwed up because nobody's reading the meter. And they haven't told people, you got to, well, go and read your meter, with that. And,
oh, boy.
Because I read my meter every time and I make sure it's right. I had my dentist, very good guy, very good work and all that. He's bitching because he thinks his bill is wrong because the meter's on the inside and he won't let him in to read the meter with that. So he's trying to get the gas meter put on the outside. We were around everything. I said, let's go read the fucking meter. I said, what are you fighting with it for? Eventually he paid a lot of money to get the meter because they didn't do all the work to get the gas meter outside, So
one thing I've noticed in the antiques back in the early radios and televisions is the amount of robustness. You called it over-engineering. And it's there. Not only that, there's a whole material science that goes with engineering. What are the strength of materials? Will they take what you send through it?
Oh, yeah.
And what's missing in the 21st century? We haven't discovered a vacuum tube. We haven't discovered a transistor. We haven't discovered chips. That's all been done. We're sitting on top of all this done hardware. And I've written software, and I can tell you it's all buggy. So I don't know if I'd sit in a car that actually drives me because I know the software is buggy. It's just a matter of finding the right combinations and permutations to hit the bug. And so I have a real hard time with driving cars. But back to the point, there is nothing that's been discovered in the last 20, 30 years. And I'm not really complaining about that. The 20th century was an absolute amazing time. There was discovery after discovery after discovery. And personally, I'm in my 60s. I'm spoiled, and I know I'm spoiled. But I am hoping that there will be something that comes along in hardware, not software, that will be a new discovery before I pass on. And then we can develop on that. But a lot of the things that we don't do for building is because it's all being farmed out. Because when you're doing basic research, you can't farm it out. You have to sit there and develop it and turn it into something usable for the world. And I think that's part of, if I may go on and moan a bit, that's part of what's happened to America. We need some new stuff. And I do know a few things, but I also know there are a lot of things that I'm not supposed to know. And you can get yourself into real problems about certain things that are being developed. And we're not supposed to know because it's a threat to national security or something. And I'm not going to go on and opine about that. I know it's out there, but I'm not going to be able to put my hands on it probably in the rest of my life. So I've been very lucky. But software, that's where we go. When we talk about something new, we immediately start talking about software because there is no hardware.
You know what's the next big discovery that's not software?
Let's hear that, Dave.
Be?
Say again?
The next big discovery that's not software?
Yes, sir.
Got some friends that used to work before they retired at the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, and they spent their whole lives trying to create fusion power. And it's starting to look like we're not there yet, but it's a lot closer than it used to be.
You put your finger on it.
It's going to be grand.
You just had to give me a few minutes. You put your finger on it. The National Ignition Laboratory out in California did it in a way that's not repeatable. They have these pellets that are going to be ridiculously impossible to feed into a system because they have to be nearly perfect spheres and blah, blah, blah. There is the accelerator where you send it around in a circle. That's probably going to be more viable. And Dave, you put your finger on it. I hope to live to see the fact that we can have fusion energy because we don't really generate energy that well. We generate enough of it to get by. Yep. But when it comes to some of the things that we may discover, they're going to take energy, and it's not the energy we put out today.
That's going to make it all seem like we're all living in Fred Flintstone's world here right now.
That's exactly so. Very good. Very good. I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things coming along in chemistry that we're not aware of. Every time you keep remixing it and making new things like that, it's all the same building blocks, all the same Lego blocks, but they come out differently every time. Yeah, you look at what the chemistry was, and it's just a matter of putting them together in a right. Well, maybe artificial intelligence will come up with some stuff like that.
Might help. Yeah.
So I put it together in such a way, that But also the computers and artificial intelligence could ask them questions that sometimes you find out, like you have some sort of disease or something's going on, and what you have to do is just get a lot of data and find some correlation and then work from there to recognize it, which one person can't do. Like in medicine, the artificial intelligence, like the doctor, all he does is like what's on his mind at the time, what the experience was. That's it. But if you had it, well, of course everybody doesn't have it. But if you had your whole medical history, and the artificial could look at that and see, and find out, put together something like that.
You're talking about an AI expert system. An AI expert system collects thousands of doctors' knowledge, medical background, and then they tries to integrate. Watson's trying to do that, but I think it was James that said, well, they're just working on the information they have. The beauty about us, you and I, and the people here, and all human beings, they can generate something out of nothing, and there isn't a machine that can do that.
Well, the something out of nothing, though, is putting it together. It's like the monkeys, they type enough, they're going to come up with something new, not just an existing book, but they'll come up with a new story, So, yeah, just of that. Trial and error is very powerful. It's a lot of things is done with it that probably Edison thing could have been done in a few minutes, or seconds, what he had to hammer away at. Some of just somebody put it in there. Like, what if I did this and that, what if I put the chocolate and the peanut butter together,
there you go.
You can come up with some new cookies, some new tastes and things like that. Who knew that you could put ground glass and hamburger and it would work,
Another,
I thought of one
thing.
Overweight is a big thing, okay, with that. And I'm thinking, like my father used to say, you eat this and it's a stomach joker. I'm thinking if you took things that didn't digest, that just went through you and filled you up, like if you took your hamburger and filled it half with ground up paper or something that just went through you, like that, and it'd satisfy you, get full, but you just didn't get any nutrition out of it.
I think they do that at Burger King.
Where's the beef? Yeah, where's the beef? Yeah, just like they say with a hot dog, it's hard to make both ends meet.
One of the other things that is interesting about living in the New Jersey area, besides tripping over vintage televisions all the time, is that
you're showing off.
It's easy to get. It's easy to get to Thomas Edison's laboratory in West Orange and take a tour
that would be awesome.
Which I've done on any number of occasions, and to see his laboratory is amazing on so many different levels. But to see the inventory, he still has the inventory in the storehouse, and he basically kept one of just about everything in there. Yeah. And when he wanted to invent a better filament for a light bulb, he would just start and tortoise shell, lion's hair, tongue of newt, and he would just try one after another. He had 30 or 40,000 things in there, and he would just it was the needle in the haystack thing there. And
iteration,
that's a terrible way to proceed, but the computers can do that real easily now. So that may come back into vogue, doing it the hard way.
Yeah. There's something called software evolution.
Yeah.
You could do something like that. There's a guy, Adrian Thompson in England, that had a Scientific American article on that. And he had a website for a while too, where he takes a certain a Xilinx chip, and it's a field programmable gate array. And he writes a program that changes the circuit, and he has a goal circuit and the circuit that he puts that he inputs, and then it has to come to 90-something% of the performance that he desires before he considers it to be complete. And it goes through generations and mutations, just like a real evolution does. And then they test it each one, and then they take the winners, and then they mate them, and they transfer part of their circuitry until he gets something. And this thing, off the bat, reinvented the Darlington and some of the other early integrated circuits. So they knew they were on the right track. And then it started to invent things that they couldn't quite explain. My battery is running low, but they found out that the system was operating through the substrate.
Really?
So they couldn't duplicate it.
Oh man, I
They
know
did
that
come up
problem.
with patentable ideas. So that's a new one. So that's a new technology in the last 20 or 30 years. Another
Okay,
one
there
is
we go.
carbon nanotubes.
Yeah, the nanotubes.
And there's another one somebody's got. Yeah. So there are lots of little things that are going on in the background in research labs, and of course you won't hear about them unless you're somehow connected to that.
Right.
Well, my battery's running low, so I'm going to have to say goodnight.
Well, James, it's been a pleasure to listen to your knowledge. It's very deep. Thank you for your time.